can't say it. I'm so excited I can't say it. Clinton's going to be here in a few minutes. I'm just so excited I can't say it.
Congressman Adam Schiff for coming here and speaking in this report. He is truly one of the most gifted, innovative members of Congress. You should be very proud of him. I want to thank Mayor Talamantes for welcoming me back to Burbank, Vice Mayor Rogers, Member of Council Emily Luddy, and thank you to the Mayor of Glendale, Paula Devine, for being here. What a pretty day. Let me say, first of all, to get to the business first, if you have a ballot and you haven't mailed it in yet, for goodness sakes, do it. Because one of the things we got to do is try to get the numbers up. A lot of people believe this election is over. It is not. The delegates necessary to be nominated in the Democratic Convention will not be tallied until California votes. So we need you. Now, yesterday Hillary gave a speech on foreign policy, and I thought it was great. But it reminds me of the larger point I want to make here. I don't want to join in the kind of campaign I watched unfold in the Republican primary that is now being brought into the general election. Here's what you need to know. The Republican nominee is basically a harsher and often cruder and clearly more negative version of a debate that's going on all around the world. Why? Because all over the world, democracies are under stress because of economics and identity conflicts. That is, everywhere, there's stagnant growth, stagnant wages, rising costs, increasing inequality, declining social mobility, and all of these conflicts over diversity. In Europe, you see it manifest in the largest refugee crisis since World War II. And here you see it in all the kind of crazy things that are being said, mostly against immigrants today. So we have a choice to make. And that is whether we're going to lead our country and the world away from this kind of politics toward an inclusive future where we have less inequality, more upward mobility, and higher income, because we work together and we value our diversity, or whether we're just going to try to build walls instead of bridges and accept the fact that we got an economy that doesn't benefit everybody, so we're just going to fight over a smaller pie. Now, America is in the best shape of any big economy in the world. We have 15 million jobs in the last 6 years. We have over 90% of our people with health care for the first time ever. In the last 3 or 4 months, finally we've seen wages start to rise again for working class and middle class Americans. So what are we going to do? That's really what this election's about. It's about you, your kids, your grandkids, the whole future of this country. If I were 25 years old again, I'd kind of like to be, just to see what's going to happen. And I got one of those magic lanterns, you know, and a genie pops out and says, you can live anywhere you want in 30 years, but you have to decide right now, I pick the United States in a heartbeat. But what we have to decide is, are we going to build a 21st century future or fall for this Make America Great Again line, which is basically, I'll give you the economy you used to have. Well, first of all, that economy wasn't so great for half of us. It wasn't so great for African Americans, for immigrants, for women, for LGBT Americans, and for lots of other people. It wasn't so good for the elderly or for the disabled. It's not so good. We can build the 21st century greatness that includes everybody, but we have to make a decision to do it. Are we going to go forward together or divided? Are we interested in a future economy or trying to recover a past we can't recover that wasn't so great anyway? And do we believe in inclusive societies instead of divided ones? Do we believe in bridges or walls? Now those are really the decisions. There are basically three reasons Hillary should be the next president, and Hillary should be your choice in the Democratic primary. One is she's got the right vision. She wants us to have a cooperative, inclusive future, inclusive economics, inclusive politics, inclusive society. Second, she's got the best ideas about what to do. And her ideas are paid for, which is important. And according to all the analysis, she's the only person you can vote for who's actually told you how she's going to pay for this stuff, and the numbers add up. One of the things that I really like about California, and I think it explains why your governor and so many of your legislators have endorsed Hillary for president, is that this is a very progressive state that figures out how to actually get things done and make real change, not just talk about it. So what's the federal government do? First of all, we should create more good jobs in a way that creates far more opportunity for everybody. A modern infrastructure program. Winning the race with Germany and China to be the clean energy superpower of the 21st century. It's true that California has by far the largest number of installed solar panels, but it's also true that Germany generated 87% of its electricity on a day 2 weeks ago solely from the sun and the wind. 87%. So much that they actually had to pay people to use electricity so the system wouldn't be overrun. And in Germany, the sun shines on average about as much as it does in Alaska or London. But the technology is such that we can do it. So when Hillary says we're going to put up 500 million solar panels in the next 4 years, she hopes that will be low because it will create lots of jobs, fight climate change, and liberate us to pursue a different sort of economy that will lift everybody's incomes and lower our poverty. The third thing we need to do is to recognize, and this is important in California, that we can bring back manufacturing to America, but it needs to be modern manufacturing. And what do I mean by that? In modern, sophisticated manufacturing, you can pay people really high wages because the number one sources of cost are not labor anymore. It's materials, transportation, and energy. If we have lower energy costs because we're in clean energy, and we're the biggest market in the world, and we save the transportation, that means we can make anything here. There's a plant in Indiana. Indiana has 20% of the workforce in manufacturing. There's a plant in Indiana making Mercedes-Benz, a German car, and selling them all in China. Because they're really good at it. We can do that everywhere in America. And we need to invest more in science and technology because it creates more jobs. I'll just give you one example. I spent $3 billion of your money when I was president to sequence the first human genome. You can now do it for less than $1,000.
Thank you.
You have gotten over $200 billion in economic investment in America from that $3 billion. That's a pretty good rate of return.
Thank you.
Not so far south of here, San Diego used to be known as America's naval city. Today there are 700 computer companies headquartered there because there are 3.6 billion genomes in your body. No one can see them. So you can't do all this sophisticated work that's leading to real breakthroughs in cancer treatment, for example, without great computing power. And they decided, because they had a foundation there, founded by Craig Benner, who pioneered the private effort to sequence the genome, and all this government research money, that they would pour it into training people to do this work. We can do this everywhere in California, everywhere in America. In small towns and rural areas, it's all agreement. So this is really important. Now, the final thing that Hillary wants to do is to get the government in the business of aggressively promoting policies that will lead the banks to loan money to small businesses again, because that's 20%. Listen to this. It's 2/3 of our job growth over the last 20 years. It's come from small business. Now, I like the Dodd-Frank bill that President Obama signed. It will prevent Wall Street from wrecking Main Street. I don't care what anybody else tells you, it's better than anything we've had for 70 years. And one of the reasons Hillary won even the most progressive ward in New York City in the last election, and did 50% better than all the people she's going to, is that there they know there are 60,000 fewer people working on Wall Street today than there were before the crash. They know these banks are being forced to slim down. They know the government already has the power to break them up if they misbehave. But what we've got to do now is to start people lending money the old-fashioned way to businesses in their communities. There is a law on the books that I enforced called the Community Reinvestment Act that says every bank in America that's got an ATM machine in the community has to consider people in that community for small business loans, for home loans. It's time to get that bill going again. And that's what Hillary wants to do. Now, but there's a second part of it. What she has called tearing down barriers instead of building walls. You can do all this, and a lot of Americans will still be left out unless you make sure we're all part of this economy. It begins with an education system that focuses in pre-K through 12 on the things that work. If Massachusetts, which has a lot of first-generation immigrants and a lot of poor people, it's not all college professors' kids, if it were a separate country, they would have the 8th best school system in the world. Not because they have lots of rules, not because they have lots of tests, but because they have focused for 20 years on what works everywhere, which is making teachers better teachers, principals better principals, and having cultures that fit the kids they're educating. She thinks since federal education money is only 7 or 8% of the total, we should emphasize that more. Not that there shouldn't be standards, not that there shouldn't be tests, but you can overdo this, and if you forget, you wind up majoring in the minors. The main thing is, do you have a good teacher? Is the principal good? Are the parents welcome in the school? Does it fit the culture of the kids there? Second thing is, not everybody needs a 4-year degree to get a good middle-class job. There are unbelievable numbers of jobs requiring skilled labor today all over America for which the labor is not available. I think some of the most impressive things I've seen in this campaign are union training programs all over the country. This is one area where she spends considerably more than her opponent, giving people skills training and re-dignifying skills training in America today so that people who want to do that can get their jobs. Next, you have to make college affordable and the debt repayable for everybody. And her position, this is one of 3 differences in this primary that I think are worth exploring. It sounds really good to say, let's just give everybody free tuition at every public school in America. The problem with that is the plan requires 1/3 of the money to come from the states. I don't think California can do that. Even at Cal Berkeley, only 13% of their money now comes from the state government. I just don't think you can do it. There are 40 states that either can't do it or they have Republican governors or Republican legislators that won't do it. Under Hillary's plan, everybody would be able to go and graduate debt-free, not just from public schools, but from smaller private schools that cater to middle-class and working-class families and first-generation immigrants, the historically black colleges and universities, all of these groups, they should be included too. And here's the way it works. Everybody that needs free tuition gets it. If you need more, there'll be a huge increase in the Pell Grant. If you can pay a little something, you ought to. If you need to work, everybody can get 10 hours a week of work study money who needs it. That will hold down the cost of college and give income to students that will help them recover costs. And then people that can pay their way ought to do it. The most important thing is what about all the debt that's already accumulated? Listen to this. The average student debt's about $25,000. But a lot of people who say went to medical school owe $200. The largest number I've seen is $400. And that, I got a letter. Hillary and I did. We got a letter together from a person whose wife was a doctor. So she graduated with $200,000 in debt, but she took all these public service-oriented jobs, so she couldn't make much debt payment, and they kept rolling over and compounding the interest, and all of a sudden she looked around 5 or 6 or 7 years later, all she's been doing is helping people, and the debt kept getting bigger. This is nuts. So here's Hillary's plan. Simple. One, a college loan is the only loan in America you cannot refinance. That's nuts. If you can, I talked to a woman the other day, 10 miles north of this little town in New York where we live, and I've been doing business with her for 10 years, and I knew she had a kid that just graduated from college, and I said, does your son have any debt? She said, yeah, quite a bit. I said, what's the interest rate? 9%. I said, do you have a home mortgage? She said, sure. Did you refinance it? She said, of course. Did you ever buy it? I said, what's your interest rate? Under 4. This is crazy. A college loan is no less a lifetime asset than a house. Everybody in this audience today, everybody in this audience today who's under 30 has a legitimate chance to live to be 100 without the specter of Alzheimer's because of the progress we're making in biomedical research. Now, if that's true, and a lot of you who are over 30 are going to do that. If that's true, a college education is more of an asset for a lifetime than any house you'll ever own. So Hillary thinks you ought to be able to turn your debt into a mortgage. That is, give people 20 years to pay it off, and no matter how much they borrow, never pay more than 10% of your after-tax income a month, ever. And that's if you owe in the upper reaches. If you owe less, you can pay less. So you would get this option. You could pay it off over 20 years, and anything that wasn't paid would be forgiven. And you think about that. If you just did that, everybody could move out of their parents' house. If you just did that, and you wanted to do a job over here that you love, but the job you have pays more, and you think you can't make your loan payment, you could take the new job because your loan payment would go down with your income. If you wanted to go borrow money to start an organic bakery or some other small business, you're toast today. If you got debt, you have no credit rating. But you wouldn't be in trouble if this were the system, because if, like most small business people, you didn't make any money the first year or so, you wouldn't know anything on the debt. This would release the energies of millions of young Americans, so we could all rise together. We could have inclusive prosperity again. It would really matter. And she also had, in her plan, an opportunity for people who are more or less the national average to get rid of it in a hurry. If you do 2 years in AmeriCorps and 1 year of any other kind of service-related work, over and above your income, you get $23,500 tax-free. Just throw it against the debt and get rid of it. Now, just think about this. This would bring a lot more people into the economic mainstream of America and do it in a hurry. There are other things we need to do. There are areas that are so depressed and have been for so long, people won't invest in them unless there's a dedicated amount of federal investment. She wants to dedicate 10% of all of our development funds to areas with really high unemployment and high poverty rates, and give a huge tax credit to people who invest private investment there. This will work. We did this at the end of my term with a big bipartisan majority vote. And in the decade that ended in 2013, this bill was much more modest than what Hillary proposed. In the decade, we had 1,000 projects that created 750,000 jobs, and 88% of the money went into it. So we did it because they gave us the tax credit to do it, and we're glad we did, because people in areas that have been left out and left behind can make money for the private economy and support us all. We've got to do this everywhere. You just can't turn around. If you believe in climate change, if you want to do something about it, then you have an extra responsibility to give those people that are stuck in coal country a way to make a modern living. If you believe in a diverse society, you have to recognize that the poorest Americans are still Native Americans living on reservations without casinos, and almost every one of them could be making a fortune today out of the fact that the sun shines there and the wind blows there. There's something wrong in Wyoming, for example, where a billionaire, and I praise him for doing this, but a billionaire sets up this massive wind farm and sells the wind energy to California and is making so much money out of it he can afford to actually pay to build a modern transmission line where the electricity can be hooked up to something powerful enough to take it. Meanwhile, in Wyoming and in Montana and in the Dakotas, there's more than enough wind blowing and enough sunshine to electrify America, and because nobody has helped them build the infrastructure, they can't do it. They can sell it to you too, and you could make that 30% renewable energy standard here look like peanuts. You could go to 40, you could go to 50 if you had everybody working with you in California and around. Hillary wants to leave these people in the driver's seat, not in the back seat of America's economy. And that's the right thing to do. Let's talk about two or three other things. The most important thing we can do in this whole area is to quit fooling around with cheap politics on immigration and pass immigration reform.
Enforce.
This is crazy. There are 11.5 million undocumented people in this country who are either in school or at work right now. They are living with 5.5 million other Americans who every day wonder, are the kids going to be kicked out of school? Are the parents going to be torn up? Will the families be divided? This is crazy. We have fooled with this long enough. And I think that it's really important that we do this. Hillary wants to make it a top legislative priority and try to get it through as soon as she can. We have got to stop doing this. One of the relatively few differences in the candidates in the primary. They voted together 93% of the time in the Senate. But they differed on 2 or 3 issues that I think are important. One was in 2007, George W. Bush had promised to sign an immigration reform bill that the late Senator Ted Kennedy would sponsor, and the farm workers were begging for it, and there's only one person in this race you can vote for who supported that immigration reform bill, Hillary. She was fought. And we should be for her on the camera. Let me say a couple of other things. There are some other populations. We need to get more of these young people out of prison that are there for nonviolent offenses and put them in the workforce. They need education, training, and they shouldn't be able to be discriminated against because they've been in prison. They go for a job interview. We need to recognize that it's abysmal that veterans still have a higher unemployment rate than the population as a whole, even though many of them are trained to do things needed to be done in this economy. But let's be honest. One of the reasons is that because of the rapid redeployments, carrying on these conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, we have a very high percentage of them that at some point in the first year or so after they come home suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome. So Hillary wants us to make a major effort to modernize mental and physical support facilities for returning veterans and others so that they can work and get whole. And this is really important.
Give them a
It is
community.
wrong for these people to be wandering around out of work and out of the mainstream of life when with just a little bit of help and support they could make it. The same thing is true, by the way, of Americans with disabilities. The fastest growing consumer group in the United States of America are Americans with disabilities. But you cannot consume unless you've got some money to consume with. And every place that there has been a widespread commitment to hiring Americans with disabilities, they have better attendance rates, high productivity rates, and they do great for everything they can be properly trained to do. It is time for a major effort from the White House to put people with disabilities who want to enter the workforce into the workforce. She wants to fix that. Let's not forget one other thing. There's been an enormous amount of progress in gay rights. But when 17 years ago, when I started trying to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, I never dreamed that the Supreme Court would legalize marriage before it mandated equal employment opportunity. So now you've got people getting married on Saturday and get fired on Monday. It is time we said once and for all, if you can work, you ought to be able to work, and nobody should discriminate against you in a job. And finally, the only thing that can have as big an impact on this as immigration reform is stopping America from being one of only 7 countries in the world, except for California, New York, and a handful of other states, that gives no paid leave. We need to have paid leave, equal pay, and affordable child care so all the women who want to be in the workforce and have children have responsibility to do it. If you did this, believe it or not, you can pay for this in a fairly straightforward way. If we adopted what's called the Buffett rule that Warren Buffett's advocated, everybody with an income of $1 million or more has to pay at least 30% of their income in taxes. That would raise a staggering amount of money. You may find that hard to believe, but it would raise a staggering amount of money. That, closing a few other loopholes and ending a lot of these tax shelters can make a difference. The other thing we could do to help income inequality is to adopt Hillary's proposal to give a 15% tax credit to people who share profits with their employees for it, and at the same time, to stop rewarding shareholders that force people out of work because they want to make money in a year and a day. The best companies in this country, the most successful ones, give you a lot of money for investing in their stock over every 5-year period, but we let you get the maximum tax cut after holding the stock for a year and a day. So you've got all these billionaires out there playing games with stock and forcing companies to lay off workers that are making money for them just so they can have more money literally in a year and a day. Hillary said it's time to stop that. No more drop of the capital gains rate in a year. Let it phase down over 5 years and give companies more rewards for helping their workers. Now these are good ideas and they'll work. But the next thing that's really important, maybe even more important, there are 2 things that could wreck this economic recovery. That could stop us from going back to shared prosperity. One is continued political gridlock in Washington. The other is having the whole rest of the world go straight to hell. If you look at what happened in the last quarter, our economic growth was cut back to 0.5% because of all this trouble everywhere else in the world. She is the only person you can vote for who has A, got a record of getting a lot done with Republicans, and B, has the experience, the trust, and the esteem in the rest of the world to keep us safe and give us the space we need to grow. When she was First Lady, she was a principal engine working with Senator Kennedy to pass the Children's Health Insurance Bill. It's a big part of Obamacare. 8.4 million kids we got. 76% of the Congress voted for it. That's a lot of Republicans. When she was in the White House with me, she went to the Republican leader who never voted with me on anything. And she said, look, I know you don't agree with us. I know you don't even like us. But I also know you adopted your children and not know them before. And you need to understand there are children just like the kids you adopted that are swallowing the ranks of foster care in America. And they're going to age out and be thrown on the streets and have their lives wrecked. It's terrible. You have to help them. And he said, why? She said, why is that happening? She said, because people are afraid to adopt children when they're not infants anymore. They're afraid they can't shape their life. And they're afraid to adopt children with special needs because they're afraid they can't afford it. So she said, you're a Republican. Let's give people a walking tax credit if they adopt non-infant children. And a bigger one if they adopt children with special needs. Then you've got to give us enough government support to help these families adjust, and then to help the kids who will age out so they have a place to live, they can get training, they can get education. All I had to do was sign the bill. There was an 80% increase in the adoption of children with foster care. You always find her other influence. And she was a senator from New York. And a lot of Republicans didn't want to do it. She talked President Bush into giving New York City $20 billion to start again. Help the first responders, the second responders, people she knew who developed respiratory problems and cancer for years and years and years afterward. She worked with John McCain to make sure we took care of veterans coming home with traumatic brain injury. She worked with Lindsey Graham to make sure that we took care of veterans coming home here in the Guard and Reserve to make sure they got the same health care regular military people did. They liked her fine. When she was Secretary of State, she had to get 67 votes, a lot of Republicans. But the only thing that survives our effort to get along with Mr. Putin, the New START Treaty, which makes accidental or intentional nuclear exchanges far less likely with Russia. They're fooling around in Ukraine today, you know, it makes us a lot safer when we've got this. She got the sanctions on Iran. She flew from Asia overnight to Egypt and worked with the Muslim Brotherhood president of Egypt to stop the shooting war between Hamas and Israel and Gaza. Republicans like this phone. And when she left office, approval in the United States is 20% higher than it was when she became Secretary of State. And one reason was, appropriate to California, is that she understood that we cannot win this contest we're in, manifested in terrorist incidents, without the help of American Muslims who love freedom and hate terror. And that the idea of discriminating against people because of their religion is crazy. It is un-American, and it's very not dangerous for us. The world is going through growing pains of our independence. But look at San Bernardino. Those people were converted over the internet, so you can build all the walls you want. You can't keep out the social media. You could spark a depression in America. When you get done building that wall across the Rio Grande, we can build a wall across the Canadian border. A lot of foreigners in Canada. You can build seawalls across the Atlantic and Pacific. We are now in depression. And you could send the U.S. Navy to the Gulf of Mexico. Just keep everybody out. You don't even have to send all the Air Force planes up in the air, keep anybody from landing. You still can't keep the social media out. We're either going to fight this battle together for what we believe in an inclusive society, in an inclusive economy, in citizenship that is empowering, not dividing. Question. The two candidates in the primary voted together 93% of the time. Why have 90% of the people plus who served with both of them endorsed her? Why did the governor of California and most of the California Democrats in the legislature endorse her? Not because they're against him, but because they want to get something done and they think she is a real leader. She's been in public office a lot less. She only served 8 years as a senator and 4 years as secretary. A old friend of mine said after the Alabama primary, he said, is it possible, what I read in the paper, that she got 93% of the African American vote in Alabama? I said, oh yeah. He said, that's more votes than President Obama did. I said, because they believe past performance is a good indication of future leadership. You think about this crazy harpy image that Republicans have tried to cultivate? Now, let me ask you this. So I met her 45 years ago in spring. Here's what she did when we were in law school. She went to Texas to register Mexican-American voters whose families had been in this country for a century or more and had never voted, have been systematically excluded from the political process. She worked on the Senate subcommittee to help migrant workers. She spent a 4th year to work at the Yale Hospital and Child Studies Center on the problems of abused children and what could be done to define what was really in the best interest of the child and do it for them. Sounds like a crazy, overambitious person in music. Right? Then she she gets out of law school, she comes to Arkansas and opens our first legal aid clinic at Ozark Mountain, and gives all these people now who are the base of Mr. Trump's campaign their first access to the legal system to get protected. Then she started a group called the Arkansas Advocates for Family and Children. She brought the first preschool program we ever had anywhere in the rural South and most poor places in America from Israel. We taught children to be taught first by their mothers, so they learned to read together, they learned to count together, they learned to grow together. This is before anybody had preschool. Then she headed our education reform